heard about her over Kevin. Thank you for recording the session, Tobias. And Kevin is one of the members at Better Soil since the beginning, and he is also a kind of assistant professor at Utrecht University, and Frances was working with him. And he introduced Frances and a very interesting work of her to us while we were looking for someone clarifying the question of planting trees where is has positive impacts and where not. This is also very interesting for the Great Green Wall, because they plant trees on many regions of the African continent, across the African continent, from east to the west, and so on. So that's why we decided to clarify some questions from while having the work of Frances. So Frances, it's great to have you here. Thank you for being here, and yes, give the floor to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon to all of you. And thank you, Azalea, for inviting me. It's a pleasure. So yeah, a little bit more about me. My name is Frances Ouwejan, and I'm currently pursuing the master's program Water Science and Management at Utrecht University. And next year, I will also start the master's program Earth and Environment with a focus on sustainable land use at Wageningen University and Research. I got my bachelor's degree in liberal arts and sciences with a major in sustainability. And during my bachelor's, I was always fascinated on, by how our actions influence the environment. That is also why I did my bachelor's thesis on afforestation in Brazil, South Africa, and India to find out if tree planting is always good and what the impact it has on the environment. I also looked for solutions to any negative impacts of tree planting. And yeah, as they said, this bachelor thesis is what got me here. And we will talk more about this subject very soon. But first, I would like to know who's here with me. And that's why I came up with a few statements. And even though this is an online setting, I would like you to raise your virtual hand if they apply to you. So let's see. First, who of you is currently active in the research field? I'll have a look at the other persons because I only see my slides. Yeah, so a few. Good. Okay, next. Whose work or research is related to climate change? More hands. Amazing. Next statement. Who of you comes from outside Europe? Yeah. Okay, good to have you here. Amazing. Great. Last one. Who of you wants to know more about where and when not to plant trees? I hope you're all raising your hand. Amazing, good. So now that we know each other a little bit more, let's see what we are going to discuss today. Good. First, I want to discuss what can happen if tree planting goes wrong, what is the cause of this, and what are the consequences. We will have a look at some important parameters that not only play an important role in the environment, but also affect us as humans. Second, of course, I also want to know when it goes right, because once we know this, we can make the right decisions when it comes to tree planting. We will also have a look at success stories and examples when tree planting goes right, to make it even more clear. So you might wonder, where does all this information come from? And as I told you, I wrote my bachelor thesis about tree planting and afforestation in different areas around the world and their impact on the environment. During my research, I met with different scientists and professionals of my case study areas. And I interviewed them in an online setting, just like this one. And we talked about all the pros and cons of tree planting and how we can do better. I got a good impression on the topic in my research areas, namely India, Brazil, and South Africa. But I also wanted to compare this information with other areas in the world. So I also conducted an in-depth literature study and comparative analysis. Now, before we really start, I want to elaborate on what tree planting is. This sounds like a simple question, but the answer might be more complex than you'd think. For example, if we think of tree planting to compensate for our carbon emissions, we can just click a button and the company will plant a tree. But what happens after this? You can ask yourselves, what species of tree will this be? Where will this tree be planted? How old is this tree? And for how long will it stay in the ground? The answers to these questions will reveal if tree planting goes right or wrong. During this webinar, I will talk about tree planting, but it can have two meanings. Or I'm talking about afforestation, which is tree planting on areas that originally had no trees in their environment, like grasslands. Or I'm talking about reforestation, where there is tree planting in areas where there have been trees or already are trees. Are there any questions about this before I continue? Because this is quite important. Or is it clear? Yes.
My question is just about what time horizon do you look into when you say, like, has there been a tree before or not? Because many people would argue like this whole Sahara area was full of trees some time ago, depending in Earth Earth dimensions, right? So is there a specific time frame?
That is a very good question. It is not that we go like back in time but before humans, for example. But it differs per research. But I think for me, when I looked into this subject, I was looking over timescales of like 100 years. And maybe, it depends per area as well, like what data is available. But yeah, I hope that makes it a little bit more clear. Also, I want to tell you that it's not that much research yet, so answers might differ per person as well. Any other questions? Or can I move on? Please also let me know if something is really unclear. Then just stop me there and we'll try to explain. Okay, let's continue then. Okay. We will first see what happens when tree planting goes wrong. And as I said, tree planting that goes wrong is mainly when afforestation happens. So I will tell you what happens when afforestation occurs on grasslands. And I can already give you a hint, it won't be pretty. To make it all tangible, we will discuss a few important parameters that not only influence the environment, but also us as humans. So let's have a look. First, let's see what happens to the water cycle when we plant trees on grasslands. I hope my laser works. Okay, good, thank you. We can have a look at these figures to find out what happens to the water in the system. So first, and we have a look at the bottom part for both figures. First, the planted trees will disturb the water availability in the system because the water availability will decrease because the amount of water trees abstract from the soil is much higher than grasses do. This is due to that trees need a lot more water than grasses and shrubs do. Then a second thing, I will look at the upper part of the figure. In grasslands, all rainfall is absorbed by the ground. All rainfall infiltrates and recharges groundwater, springs, and aquifers. But when there are trees, about 30% is intercepted by the canopy and evaporates back into the atmosphere. And you might think that it doesn't really matter because the rain will return to the area as rain. But research found that on an area of 50 square kilometers, only 1.7% of the transpired water will return to this area as rain. So almost all transpired water will disappear from the area. Then third, and we'll have a look at the middle part, the trees planted during afforestation are mainly monocultures of pine trees because this is economically feasible. They grow fast and pine trees thrive in many different climates. However, the needles of these trees cover the ground layer, which results in increased runoff. So less infiltration into the soil and this less recharge of groundwater. To see a real-life example of this, we have to look at a case study in South Africa. As you might know, South Africa is a very dry country, and therefore the most important ecosystem service that grasslands provide is water availability. However, due to tree planting, less water is available. A study was done on the impacts of tree planting on stream flow using a modification of a model of plantation water used and developed by NANI. The NANI curves were based on a hydrological study of grasslands and pine afforested catchment at the Cathedral Peak in the KwaZulu-Natal, Drakensberg. And it showed a decrease in stream flow and water availability after the trees were planted upstream. You can now see that with all the water used and evaporated by planted trees, that people living in the region were left with very little water. Let us move on to another important parameter, namely biodiversity. Again, a figure to visualize what happens when afforestation on grasslands is done. The ironic thing is that tree planting is often a strategy in increasing biodiversity, but if done wrong, it can have the opposite effect. There are a lot of things to say about what afforestation does to biodiversity, but time-wise, I will tell you about the most direct effects. So first, afforestation is often done in the form of plantation of monocultures of invasive non-native plants and, like I said, pine trees. This results in major biodiversity loss because, as you might know, in many cases, invasive non-native species outcompete the native species because there are no controlling factors in place yet. In addition, tree planting often involves clearing large areas of grasslands, leading directly to the loss of habitat for grassland species. The loss of suitable habitat reduces gene biodiversity that can result in population declines or even extinction of the grassland-dependent species. Thereby, the remaining grassland patches become fragmented, which further isolates populations and increases vulnerability of the local species to disturbances and environmental changes. And last but not least, something that is shown in the figures as well, and I'll quickly show you what I'm talking about. A very important reason for biodiversity loss due to afforestation on grasslands is the shade that is provided by the canopy of the planted trees. And what I mean by canopy, I think most of you know, is like the top part of the trees. The vegetation on the ground in the grasslands are almost always shade intolerant, which means they thrive in sun. And you might see now that when canopies provide a lot of shade, the vegetation on the ground dies. So to give you an idea of biodiversity loss due to tree planting on grasslands, I can tell you that research found that by planting one tree species, only one, 6 non-tree species disappear. I also have a figure which shows a negative feedback mechanism on the afforestation on grasslands and how they affect the different parameters in the system, which leads to the decrease of biodiversity. I'll give you some time to look at it and I'll Perfect. Okay, I hope you all had a look. Because I now want to make it even more concrete. I wanted to show you an example about the rewilding of India and one of my favorite animals on the planet, actually. In India, they've tried to reintroduce cheetah to the ecosystems, but they showed to be more difficult than they expected. The areas where cheetahs thrive, like grasslands, are becoming scarce because of all the tree planting that is happening. So for now, the reintroduction of the cheetah has not been a great success story. I know that what I tell you is not all food for happy thoughts, but bear with me. I promise you I'll tell you all about the good stuff as well. But first, let's have a look at the relation between carbon, climate mitigation, and afforestation. We know that carbon and climate change are intertwined, and I want to tell you a bit about the effects of tree planting related to this. As you might know, the widespread root system and soil organic matter of grasslands contribute to a great amount of carbon storage below ground. In contrast, tree plantations store carbon above ground in their trunks, branches, and leaves. While trees can accumulate a great amount of carbon in their biomass, this above ground carbon is vulnerable to wildfires, which are common in grassland ecosystems. Therefore, planting trees in grasslands can decrease the capacity of carbon in these ecosystems. Another way of climate regulation by grasslands is through the albedo effect. And I have two figures here which show you the difference, but I will explain, of course. Yeah, so the albedo effect, which refers to the ability of an object to reflect sunlight, is shown in the figures, and a higher albedo indicates that a surface reflects more sunlight back into space. On the other hand, a lower albedo implies greater absorption of sunlight by the surface, which contributes to global warming. And as you can see in the figure on the right, the grasslands in the white circle have a higher albedo compared to forests in the black circle. The lights, colored nature of grasslands, allow them to reflect a substantial amount of sunlight back into space, reducing the absorption of heat and exerting a cooling effect on the climate. Let us have a look at an example of tree planting done in a wet grassland. The wet grasslands in Brazil store a great amount of carbon. Usually they contain a 2 to 3 meter black layer of of organic carbon. But when there was tree planting done in and around this area, this resulted in carbon absorption by the trees, and the ground turned white and dry. All underground carbon was lost, and this carbon is now stored in the above ground biomass of trees, which is very vulnerable to the natural fire regime in this area. And you can already see it coming when these wildfires come, and they will come, the carbon will return back into the atmosphere. So the last parameter I want to discuss is the soil. Also about the impacts of afforestation on soil in grasslands is a lot to say. Let's stick to the most important ones, including soil erosion and soil fertility. First, about soil erosion, the level of soil erosion increases when trees are planted in the grasslands due to multiple reasons. Namely, tree plantations often have less ground cover compared to grasslands. The lack of vegetation cover exposes the soil surface to erosion by wind and water. In addition, the presence of trees in grasslands alter the hydrological dynamics, as I mentioned before, leading to increased surface runoff. The increased surface runoff results in greater soil erosion as the water flows over the soil surface and carries away the sediments. Now, when we look at the figures, I mainly like the arrows. I hope no one's colorblind, but I will say this figure contains more colors than this one, just so you know. Okay, so when we look at the figure, we can discuss some more about the soil fertility and in more specific ways, the nutrients. That's also what the colors stand for. So again, figure 9 has more colors, and figure, which has no number, but figure 8 has less colors, so less nutrients. The planted trees will compete with the native vegetation in grasslands for resources, and that thereby deplete specific nutrients in the soil, leading to imbalances in nutrient availability in the grassland ecosystem, especially when the planted trees are monocultures. To add on to this, research also found that because trees need more nutrients, there is a need of using fertilization in these ecosystems. This will cause more nutrient imbalances in the soil. Then an example, as I said before, due to financial reasons and the strength of pine trees, they are often planted in large numbers on grasslands. But again, the risk of nutrient imbalance within the grassland ecosystem will increase even more when monocultures of these trees are planted, resulting in a depletion of specific nutrients as the monocultures only use a certain nutrient. And in addition, organic acid leachate from the needles result in soil acidification and high levels of aluminium, which releases toxic levels to the soils and thereby also the roots. Well, that was a bit depressing, wasn't it? I realized that for me as a student within the environmental sciences, it's easy to focus on everything that's going wrong and that we should change our behavior to fix it. But how can we do this when we do not always have the knowledge on how to change it? Well, I'm very happy that you're still here and that you want to find out where to plant trees in order to have a positive impact on our environment and also ourselves. So let's have a look at 3 examples on how to do the tree planting right. These examples come from the recommendations that were given by scientists and experts in the field. I will tell you about reforestation on degraded areas, agroforestry, and urban tree planting. I will also share with you some success stories because we are now in the happy part of the webinar. So first, let's have a look at reforestation on degraded land. Reforestation is the process of planting trees in areas where they have been cut down or otherwise removed. It's a practice aimed at restoring or creating forests that may have been lost due to logging, wildfires, urbanization, or other human activities. So let's be clear that I'm talking about degraded areas, not healthy grasslands. During reforestation, various tree species are planted in target areas. The specific methods and techniques used may vary depending on factors such as climate and soil conditions. Common methods include seed planting, sapling transplantation, and aerial seeding. If done correctly, reforestation has positive impacts on the environment. First, reforestation helps conserve biodiversity by providing habitats for numerous plant and animal species. And forests are like complex ecosystems that support a wide range of flora and fauna by restoring them. And then by restoring them, we can contribute to the overall ecosystem health. Second, Trees play an important role in regulating water cycles, as I told you before. Tree roots absorb the soil and store water, helping to prevent flooding during heavy rainfall and ensuring a more stable water supply during dry periods. Stabilizing the water cycle is important in degraded areas, as in these areas soils often don't hold the water. Third, trees absorb carbon dioxide during photosynthesis, helping to mitigate the effects of climate change. As they grow, trees store carbon in their biomass and in the soil. Reforestation thereby plays a crucial role in reducing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. At last, but not least, trees play a vital role in preventing soil erosion. Their roots systems help bind soil particles together, reducing the risks of landslides and improving water retention in the soil. Now, let's have a look at a reforestation example. This is a study in Brazil. The Amazon rainforest in Brazil is one of the obvious examples of a place in direct need of reforestation. Because after a 17% loss in land area in the last 50 years, the region is now the focus of a 6-year tree planting program. The aim of this project is to plant 73 million trees in the area, and is the world's largest tree planting project in tropical forests. 2 methods are applied in this area, which is direct planting and sowing of native trees. The former provides a quick solution to global warming by aiding carbon capture, but soils become poor because of the reasons I mentioned before. So the latter is used with direct planting to promote natural regeneration of the forests, and above all, this then prevents soil erosion. If they succeed and no other factors disturb the project, this project will help Brazil meet its target of planting 12 million hectares of land by 2030. So I hope it works. So another example of good tree planting is agroforestry. A first note is that indigenous people have practiced agroforestry for millennia, but this technique is now gaining popularity with farmers everywhere around the world. So agroforestry is a land use system that integrates trees planting with agricultural crops and or livestock. It involves the management of both forestry and agricultural components on the same area of land. Agroforestry practices aim to optimize the interactions between trees, crops, and animals to achieve multiple environmental and economic benefits. So during agroforestry, various techniques are employed to combine trees or shrubs with agricultural activities. I want to tell you about 2. But there are many more. But the 2 I want to talk about, the first technique is called alley cropping. This is about planting rows of trees or shrubs between crops, and this provides multiple benefits such as improved soil fertility, windbreaks, and shade for crops. The other technique is called silvo pasture, and this is integrating trees with pasture or livestock systems. The trees provide shade for the animals, contribute to forage production, and can enhance overall ecosystem health. So how can agroforestry enhance the ecosystem health specifically? Well, first of all, agroforestry contributes to environmental sustainability by enhancing biodiversity, improving soil fertility, and reducing erosion. Second, trees in agroforestry systems can contribute to water management by reducing runoff, enhancing groundwater recharge, and improving water quality. Then third, agroforestry systems play a role in mitigating climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the presence of trees in agricultural landscapes can also help mitigate the impact of climate change by providing cooling effects, such as shade. And last but not least, the integration of trees with crops can improve soil structure, nutrient cycling, and, as I said, water retention, leading to healthier and more productive soils. Overall, agroforestry is recognized as a sustainable land use strategy that addresses the complex interplay between agriculture, forestry, and environmental conservation. So, to make it more concrete, let's have a look at agroforestry in Cameroon. At first glance, Cameroon's western region seems lush, but a closer look shows land degraded by overgrazing, unsustainable cropping practices, deforestation, and uncontrolled bushfires. But still, some plots thrive with high biodiversity. Coffee grows under shade of banana trees, while nearby there are African plum trees, oranges, and timber trees. To the untrained eye, these plots might appear as natural forests, but it is in fact the fruit of agroforestry, the growing of trees with crops. So from an environmental scientist perspective, you can say about agroforestry practices in Cameroon that is mimicking what you would find in a typical forest. Because you find at least 3 structures of diverse species, which are all growing in an optimum manner, and thus enhance the ecosystem. But from a farmer's perspective, the strength of agroforestry is that different plants supply different products at different times of the year, providing an extra source of income. So that's a win-win. Good. The last example for a right way of planting tree is urban tree planting. Tree planting in urban areas involves the cultivation and establishment of trees within cities and towns. Urban tree planting is a response to the challenges posed by urbanization, such as air pollution, heat island effects, and the loss of natural habitats. During tree planting in urban areas, several steps are taken. So first, you have to choose a suitable location for tree planting. Factors such as soil conditions, available space, proximity to buildings, and the specific needs of the chosen tree species are considered. Then you actually have to select tree species that are well suited to the urban environment. Considerations include tolerance to pollution, adaptability to urban soils, resistance to pests, and the ability to thrive in limited space. After that, the planting process starts. Trees can be planted in various ways, including planting saplings or young trees, or planting mature trees, or utilizing container-grown trees. At last, there is a need of maintenance of the newly planted trees. They require ongoing maintenance, including watering, pest management, and monitoring. This is crucial for the long-term health of urban trees. So, urban tree planting is considered beneficial for several reasons. First, trees provide shade and help mitigate the urban heat island effect, where cities experience higher temperatures compared to the surrounding rural areas. This cooling effect can reduce energy consumption for air conditioning, for example, and improve overall comfort. Second, urban trees provide habitat for birds, insects, and other wildlife, contributing to urban biodiversity. And this is especially important as natural habitats are often reduced in urban environments. Next, trees in urban areas act as a natural air filter, removing pollutants such as particle matter and absorbing harmful gases. This contributes to to improved air quality and public health. Last but not least, the trees will help manage stormwater by absorbing and slowing down rainwater runoff. and thereby reducing the risk of flooding and erosion. They also contribute to groundwater recharge. Now let's have a look at a project in England. It started in 2008 and it's called the Bankside Urban Forest. It is a long-term open forest strategy involving one of the oldest and most historic areas of London. The aim of this project is to integrate forest ecology principles into streets and spaces to deliver better public space for people and wildlife, while making the neighborhood more resilient and greener. The urban tree planting in the Bankside has multiple positive effects on the environment, like an increase in biodiversity, temperature regulation, because trees provide shade, for example, better air quality, and a reduction in water runoff, because, as I said, the trees will hold the water. Okay, so we discussed many things related to tree planting. So can we now answer the questions where and where not to plant trees? I will summarize for you the main points so that I'm sure that you remember. So where do we not plant trees and why? We don't plant trees where that do not occur or did not occur. This tree planting or afforestation will cause more harm than good by disturbing the natural ecosystem and the components like biodiversity, the water cycle, climate mitigation, and the soil. So where do we plant trees? We can plant trees in degraded areas where trees already occur or occurred. The examples we have seen include reforestation, agroforestry, and tree planting in urban areas. The success stories show that they have a positive impact on the environment and on us. So if you keep this in mind, tree planting will go right. Thank you all for listening, and thanks again, Azadeh, for inviting me. Please reach out to me if you want more information or you want to read my thesis, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Frances, for the very interesting and very clear message where to plant trees and where not, especially on grasslands. I think I find it very interesting and useful in many cases. Many information were very clear. So you see that applause are coming.
Thank you.
So let's ask. Let's open the Q&A session. If you have questions, just raise your hand and unmute yourself and go for the question.
Should I unshare my screen? Because I would like to see all the faces.
I mean, you can, but maybe later some questions are referring to slides, so you can reshare it.
Yeah, very good. Let's see how I do this. I want to unshare. How do I do this? I don't know. Oh, never mind.
Hi, Francis.
Yes.
It's a good presentation, first of all.
Thank you so much.
Just I have a query regarding the soil, as you shown that afforestation and grassland soils, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know, do you think like any basic difference in soil properties and soil parameters, exactly which soil will be better for for long term, I'm asking. Can you please tell me once, I mean, how exactly it works, please?
So can you please repeat your question, because I don't think the Wi-Fi is that good with me, but
my question is, I just want to know the difference between the your afforestation soils and grassland soils in terms of soil parameters.
Yes. So during my research, I focused, first of all, mainly on grasslands in like the southern part of the world, and then I have looked at what happened to the soil parameters when afforestation happened, and the most important thing I saw is that when trees are planted on grasslands, the soil will degrade because water is just absorbed from the soil. And as you know, in the water, it's not only water, it's also nutrients, and the carbon, everything is sucked up out of the soil. So in terms, it's just in the trees. So the soil will degrade through that. Does that answer your question? Did I understand it correctly?
Yeah, fine. But what I'm asking, like, you just separate those different soils. I'm asking. You just tell me about your forest soil and grassland soil separately. Is there any differences you found?
Okay. So no, there is not. With healthy forests and healthy grassland ecosystems, there's not a big difference. It is just that you degrade the ecosystems in grasslands, their soils, if you plant trees, because you will disturb the ecosystem. So if you have a healthy forest and a healthy grassland, they are both healthy, so both have the same amount of nutrients, not the same nutrients, of course, because different vegetation types, but they are healthy and they have like everything they need, if that's what you're asking about.
Actually, I was just concerned about the tree you are talking is pine trees, right?
Yes,
Pine
mainly pine trees, yeah. But it will also
Yeah.
happen if you plant other trees as well, because the ecosystem, the grassland ecosystem, is just not used to that. So you'll just change the ecosystems and their parameters.
So my concern is like pine trees. We, as much as I know about forests, that we have coniferous forests, we have deciduous forests. So pine trees are coming under coniferous forest, which is some sort of acidic in nature. So the soil of that particular forest will be definitely soil will be acidic in nature.
Yeah.
But so as we know that in acidic pH, if the soil is acidic in nature, so mainly fungi will prevail in that soil. No bacteria will very hardly will find there. But in case of grassland soil, if you see the pH, it will be above around like more or less like a neutral type. So beneficial bacteria will be more. So that soil nutrient, I mean, availability will be more. I mean, is this sort of things like that?
Yeah, you're totally right. You're right about that. I did not do an in-depth search on the soil as like you were talking about, like it's very specific. So I kept it on like the main parameters, but you were totally right. Like the acidic how to say that? As you said, pine trees are more acidic because of the needles and everything. So yes, that's also what I tried to tell you. Like, if you do that on the ecosystems in grasslands, you will increase the or decrease the pH of the grasslands, and then it will have the effect of like changing the whole ecosystem there. So you are right. That's what I'm trying to say. You're right.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank
you.
I saw that Elahe was taking some notes. Maybe you have some questions.
Yes, please.
Thank you for your presentation. My question would go again to pine trees, because as far as we know, pine trees, for example, the litter of pine trees, the leaves that left on the soil, they give lots of carbon to the soil. But when we want, for example, to have, doing afforestation of pine trees in some areas for just the reason that we give more carbon reservoirs to the soil, what should we do? Because we are talking about the acidic situation of the pine trees. For example, in the area where I live in Iran, in the northern part, for example, in some areas we see that they are just broadening the forests like with pine trees, but on the other hand, we have the acidic situation in our soils. Do you have any solution or perception in this case that can help us, that we can improve soil
Yeah.
in that case?
Yeah,
Because
so
these are getting so in opposite hands.
Yeah,
you know.
definitely. So you are talking about afforestation, right? Okay, so
Sorry, my mic was off. Yes,
don't
yes.
worry. Okay, good. So yeah, as I said, afforestation on areas where there were no trees is actually always bad. And we get that we want to work on like the carbon emissions and try to absorb them through trees. But the thing is also, as you mentioned, I don't think the pine trees were there before. And you have this problem with the acid of the pine trees and the needles and everything. It is actually just a case of looking at native species. So if you want to plant trees, look for the native species that occur in the area. If there were no tree species, then don't plant trees. Then you have to look for shrubs or for grasses or for whatever you can find, but it has to be native because otherwise you'll disturb the ecosystem. Does that make sense?
Just as thank you for your answer, but just as another question, do you have any tips, for example, for rice fields, for example, because you were talking about agroforestry as
Yes.
a success story that we all know about it. Do you have any tips that you can give us, for example, on rice monoculturing? For example, we are really facing with intensive monoculturing of rice, for example, in the area where I live, and I'm sure that the soil is getting degraded. Do you have any tips in the case of agroforestry we can improve the soil quality of such a monoculturing?
Yeah, so I am not the expert on rice fields, so I don't know the specifics, but what I do know is that keeping an ecosystem diverse is what keeps your ecosystem healthy. So I think it's very important to find a way to include agroforestry into like the rice fields, because having one type of vegetation will never be good. And I don't think it was that the way before. I think they just want monocultures because that it's financially good.
But the case is that somehow we see that around the rice field we have trees.
Yeah.
But it is just planted beforehand. Maybe it is not a targeted tree species just for doing the agroforestry. It is just planted beforehand, and then they establish the rice field or something like that. For example, in tea gardens in my area, we also have tea cultivations. For example, around it we find citrus trees. They are so evergreen trees, like orange trees or tangerine or something from this family. But
Yeah.
it is, our tea gardens are very old, like for 100 years ago, they established such tea gardens, and around it, for sure, you find citrus trees, gardens of citrus trees. But maybe it is a kind of agroforestry, but for rice fields, I don't find it an agroforestry system that established that. It was just they planted some trees around their fields.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I get what you're
do you
saying.
have any idea? I don't know if you have worked if you have worked in tea gardens also. Do you have any idea of agroforestry in tea gardens or?
No, I don't. But what I'm also thinking about is, I think that, for example, the tea plants or the rice plants, they have, are they also changing like their crops? Like, do they do one field this and then the next time another species, or do they just cultivate it again and again and again on the same soil?
Yeah.
Because that is also something to keep in mind. Because if we make the ecosystem more diverse or we change up the crops we use, that is also something to give the soil a bit of stress relief, because one type of vegetation will just absorb one type of nutrients and everything. So that's also what you see with fertilization. If you use one crop at a time and you use it over and over, you need to fertilize your system more and more. So if you change your crops more often, then the soil can recharge with the nutrients that were used before. Do you know what I mean?
We
Yes,
call
I
it crop
understand.
rotation.
Yeah, crop
Yeah.
rotation. That's the
Yeah.
word I'm
It is
looking
crop
for.
rotation, yeah. Yeah, but we see it. For example, last summer I visited a tea garden, for example, and I saw a pomegranate tree in the surrounding, and also this pumpkin, squash, butternut squash, for example, they were planting surrounding the tea garden, for example. It was interesting, and also I saw, for example, in a peanut garden, around the peanut garden was like spruce trees, for example. I think it was the targeted agroforestry they did, as I see. But in the case of rice field, I don't see it like a targeted agroforestry.
Yeah, maybe also because rice need a lot of water. If they will use trees, maybe they will just absorb all the water, and they are scared like that they need to add more and more and more water. So that might be something to consider.
Do you have? Are you in
Eloy, I think we
agronomic?
have different questions now.
Okay.
Maybe you can also
Maybe I can
clarify
just
the
move
questions
this
later.
You can always
with
reach out to me,
Frances.
of course. Yeah.
So I go to Tobias and then later to Danra and then go to Roel.
Thank you very much, Francis, for your talk. What I really liked was that you were giving us like directions in the terms of principles, right? You didn't say, okay, if you have that crop, use that crop here and here it works, because then you need to define the situation over again. But with the principles, you can look at something, judge with probably 80% whether it could go wrong or right, and then dig deeper and analyze the system. For example, what kind of species you would like to plant or even not to plant. But what often shined through was that it's basically the economics that destroys the concept of good tree planting, right? So people want the fast money, and therefore they plant pine trees in rows that even look ugly from above, right? So
Yeah.
so best arguments for economists to do it right are economic arguments as well. So
Definitely.
if you gave those people the right economic arguments, which I'm sure they are available, then they might change their behavior. So I would be wondering if you have such information like, I don't know, where people really looked into the numbers and say it's even more profitable to do it correctly, or is that never the case?
I've looked at some research about also social factors and economic factors. And what shines through is that if you because they use the pine trees because they grow fast, they are cheap, and they are thriving in many areas. Well, the tree is thriving, the ecosystem will not thrive. So that's why they use them. But then they looked at trees which also will give you like literally the fruits of planting trees. So that is better for the ecosystem, but also for the people surrounding it, because what can they do with pine trees? Not that much. But if you use trees with fruits or whatever, they can use it, and they can build their economy also with that. And that was something that was very interesting. It's not that research yet, because it's mainly like very big businesses that plant the monocultures of pine trees. So
and they are not interested in plums or fruits, right? They are
no, not
interested
really.
in cutting them down, using the
Yes.
biomass for synthetic fuel production, for example, which is a big business, or simply using them as energy and electricity source. And if you combine it with carbon capture, that's even something that is in IPCC reports under BECS, right? Bioeconomy, carbon capture and storage. So I would be wondering in combining those things, Because if you want to do big impact, you need big money, and therefore you
Yes.
need to talk to those people that are doing big destruction with their money right now.
No, that is true. And the thing that I'm afraid for is that the businesses just want, as you said, like the quick money, because the pine trees grow fast. And if you have to plant a native tree, it will have to stay in the ground for like 30 years to really contribute to like the carbon emissions and everything. And of course, they also, as you said, want to cut them down and use them for other sources. So that's also why I started with the question, like, what is tree planting? And you have to ask yourself, if I plant a tree, for how long will it stay there, what species and everything. So it is complex, but money is a big factor as well. So that's difficult.
Okay, Danra, you unmuted yourself. Do you have a question? But you didn't raise your hand.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I was a bit late, but I caught you in the right time.
Good.
For those who don't know me, I'm Danra Jakpajidone. I'm lecturer at the University of Marwa in Cameroon, in the far north region of Cameroon. And about the reforestation, I have a lot of experiment from the Sahelian zone here. With we have several projects here that are mixing agriculture and reforestation, mostly with the acacia species tree. Because the acacia species tree, they are really benefit for the soil and for the biodiversity. And when we, for some project, when we explain it to the farmers, the importance of the acacia, they really accepted it. And the problem with the reforestation and the money is that here in Africa and mostly in the Sahel zone, we are still using firewood for cooking and building houses and everything. And when you will link the gain from the reforestation and they are really need, the population really accepted the agroforestry system that we proposed. And I think it depends on the mentality and the really need of the farmers to accept the reforestation. And in many cases, it was a bit difficult because I think it's everywhere in the world. It was to raise the money quickly because these trees are not growing fast and they have to take care, and they are really looking for what we have for tomorrow. It's not what we have for 10 years or 20 years, what we need for tomorrow. I think, but when we explain it very well, and we have a small project, we call it the Revitech project here, and we tested with some farmers here. It was working. It was working because we also need to be a what to say. We need to think like these people, just not like a scientific. We need to think like these people, and we will really get and catch what they really need.
Yeah, definitely.
From what we are looking at. Yes. That is what my experience. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very interesting, and I think you're totally right.
Thank you, Danra. Yeah, it was very interesting insight from your experience. Roel, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Frances. I learned a lot after your presentation. I would like just to add some information. A research study showed that in the process of reforestation, it is better to reforest land with many species, with many tree species, and it is good to to use different species to combat the effect of climate change on the soil, notably. And the study showed that if we use, for example, almost 80 different species to reforest, it can decrease 3 degrees of soil temperature. And you know that one of biggest challenge we face in the context of climate change is the rising of temperature at the soil scale. So I share my publication on that and comment part for you if you would like to access. So, and at the level of grassland, it is interesting to know that the reforestation can be used at pump of nutrients for different crop at the level of grassland. I don't know really what is the different species we can use. For example, in Africa, like my precedent speaker. So the precedent speaker talked about in the region of Saharan region here, we use reforestation most in the case of restoration of land, and often we use native species. I don't know if native species give better result than other species. Can you clarify? Do you have experience, or do you have study you can show the importance to use native species than foreign species?
Yeah,
this is my first question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, as I said, it is actually always better to use native species because they have controlling factors in place. If you use non-native species, the possibility is that they don't have any controlling factors, so that they will outcompete other species. So you get it out of balance. So yeah, that's like the short answer. And I will look for research and I can send it to you.
Thank you. How do you know that reforestation will be the success in the context of climate change and the modification of temperature, rainfall, etc., etc.? I know that scientists make often modelization to know if the different species can adapt to the environment, but I don't know if there is an other way to assess or to know if the reforestation process can be the success in the dynamic of climate change.
So what was your question exactly?
Okay, maybe I will repeat.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, so I said that scientists use modelization to know if for example, I choose acacia, and I would like to reforest acacia in Germany, for example. They use modelization to know if the different conditions we can have in 2025, for example, acacia can adapt to this condition in Germany. And I would like to know that if there is no way, other scientists way to know if you can use such a species to reforest such an environment or city or land. Yeah, the thing is, there is not that much study done yet. So I really hope that a lot of people get inspired and see what is happening with tree planting, and just not plant trees because they want to have an easy way to compensate for their climate, for their carbon emissions.
So there is more need of research, and I don't know if anyone else in the meeting knows anything more about this, because I am afraid that I don't know anything more than I just told you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Danra, can you come later? I know that Abdul Majid raised his hand,
Okay.
but I don't know if
Okay.
he is still in the call, and then after him you can raise awareness.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Abdul Majid, you are again in the call. You raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Yes. Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunities to explain my thing. I think that this webinar is very important for me. Thank you, Frances, for your presentation. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
But yeah, I have some to add. I'm not a English speaker, I'm a Frenchman, but I'm going to try to explain why I really think. You know, here we are in sub-Sahara country in Niger. A farmer has have not many area, many hectares for area. That agroforestry, I'm going to talk about agroforestry. I think that farmers can accept to reduce his few areas to planting trees in the farm. That it is here. My question is for your experience. You think that it's a good piece for the farmers in these areas to tell us to tell him put the agroforestry to give us this advantage.
Yeah.
So the question is if I have.
It's not.
Sorry.
Okay. It's not very clear for you, but I'm going to explain. I don't know if you get me well. The connection is not very good.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe if I understood Abdel Majid, I think he is asking if, according to your experience,
yes,
is it good to advise farmer from the Sahelian zone, like in Niger, to do agroforestry in their farmland?
Yeah, so
is it that?
It is that.
Yeah, especially because if I understood correctly, especially because they have very small and limited space.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe
no, I think it's not about space. It's about water, I think.
Yeah, right, about water. I was also thinking because correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a specialist in all areas. But if we look at water and you want to do agroforestry, you really have to look at your climate and the things that are mostly difficulties for you. So I think you said Sahara region. That is very dry. So I don't know if it would be the best idea to plant a lot of trees that will absorb all the water and evaporate it. But what we discussed already, I think it's important to look at native species and try to, mix it up a little bit so that you don't, dry out or use all the nutrients from the soil with only one crop or monocultures or that kind of things. I don't know if that answers your question. So yeah, it's hard for me to say like, no, don't advise them agroforestry, because I'm not an expert in the field, but you really have to look at the climate situation and native species.
Maybe I can add to what Frances said to water availability or more water availability, for instance, in soil while planting trees in agroforestry systems. We have some regions in Germany, for instance, they are very dry, less than 400 millimeter precipitation per year, and they have sandy soil. So when the region is dry and you have sandy soil, it's the worst combination you can have for your cropping system. And I know it from some studies that planting trees in rows, so let's say the distance between the two rows were about 48 meter and the crops were in between. And these kind of agroforestry increased crop yield up to more than 20% of the whole system. So you had crop loss at the border to the trees, but you had crop increase while distancing to the trees. So the whole system could compensate, and and you had in total more yield. As I said, more than 20%. So this is, for instance, for maize production is very interesting to have more maize per hectare. So and in case of Iran, we have also some agroforestry systems in Iran. Iran is also a very dry region with sandy soil in many cases, but not a whole the country. You can see also improvement of crop yield in agroforestry systems in many dry regions and semi-arid regions on sandy soil. Danra, now your turn.
Yeah, to help Abdul Majid, I think it's possible to do agroforestry. Yeah, because for a simple thing, because when we are the crop that we are growing are not taking all the water that we are giving to them. I think the rest can be given to the plant, and this is simply, and we have a lot of projects like the green what do we call it? We call it in French la ceinture verte. Yeah, the green wall.
Okay.
Yeah, they are doing a lot of this agroforestry in the Sahel, also in the Niger, and then mainly in the Niger, I think. You can get a lot of information about it. Don't worry, it's possible to do that. It's possible to advise farmers to do it according to all these experiments.
It's very good, Dandra, that you said the agroforestry system within the project of Great Green Wall, because we had a talk with one of our members of Better Soil, and he comes from Kenya, and he somehow criticizes also the work of Great Green Wall, because they plant trees on grasslands in some cases. And that's why we also invited, one of the reasons were also we invited Frances to clarify why we should not plant trees on grasslands, because Africa, the whole continent, has many grasslands, and planting trees to compensate or to increase carbon in the soil and carbon in the tree is not an acceptable, beneficial work. So yeah. Leah, this is your turn, raising your hand.
Please, Azadeh, before Leah, just want to ask how to restore or to face desertification in Africa if you find that it is not a good idea to reforest dry land.
Okay, well, Leah, we couldn't hear you.
Thank you also.
I don't know how we should proceed here because we cannot hear you very good. Roel, I come back to it. Maybe Frances wants to clarify on it. Yeah. Okay, Frances, go for it. And then Leah, your internet connection was a little bit unstable. Maybe you can reshare your comments and question later.
If I'm correct, the question was how to restore afforested areas.
No, how to restore deserted
deserted
areas.
okay,
yeah.
okay.
When not planting trees.
Yes, okay. So as I said, and that's not really my research area, like the deserted areas. But the main thing, and I think I will hand over to Azadeh then, is to really look at native species that did occur in that area. It might be trees, it might be shrubs, it might be grasses, but the real procedure on how to do it, I'm not an expert in.
Go back to your question, Roel. Many of the deserted areas were agricultural lands, but they are deserted now because of overusage or over fertilization or over grazing and so on. And mostly they are human produced desert lands. So in many cases, you can plant trees to increase carbon content below and underground, to bring back water and to bring back nutrients to the soil, because the tree can absorb nutrients from the soil, from the air, and put it in the soil. So in many cases you can plant trees, but the grasslands, they are not desert lands. They are already a functional system, functional ecosystems that are containing a huge amount of carbon below ground. And when you plant trees on these areas, you remove the carbon from the soil to the tree, and it's more vulnerable to burn, like burning forest you see in Canada, in Germany, in Spain, and in many different countries. And then this carbon is going back to the atmosphere, and the carbon should stay in the soil where it belongs. So this is only the point of to identify where the carbon belongs, where the carbon is at home. When the carbon is at home in grassland below ground, and then you should not put it above ground and put it in a tree. And Frances was also mentioned that not only trees, we can plant bushes, we can plant different perennial or grasses. We were talking about great green carpet with Kevin, one of our member at Better Soil, and he was proposing, why not great green carpet instead of great green wall in many regions where grasslands are already removing huge amount of carbon from the atmosphere. So going back to Leah. Leah, can you hear us now?
Yes. And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Francis, for your presentation. I'm Leah Rosin. I'm PhD student in soil ecology at the University of Ngaoundé in Cameroon, in the northern part of Cameroon. Of course, green up here in the northern part of Cameroon, but I'm from west region of Cameroon. And you talk about agroforestry in the west region of Cameroon. And yes, I was very excited because agroforestry is
Oh no.
It was getting interesting.
Yeah.
Leah. Okay, I think she's out of the call. I assume. Is there another question or comment till Leah comes back to the call?
And otherwise, you can always email whatever. It's all fine. Tobias.
And my question is about the combination of civilization and restoration of ecosystems, because one example is Cairo. And I think in Cairo, in Egypt, they made an experiment because they have a lot of problems with all the wastewater from the communities. They are rapidly expanding, huge population growth, urbanization is taking place, but not everywhere you have good, cleaning and sanitation of the water that has been used, for example, in toilets or wherever. So they took this water, cleaned it up a bit to the level that trees can still deal with it, and it contained all the nutrients from the city waste, so to say, and the excrements and stuff. And then outside of the city, they planted trees fed or watered by that extra water, right? And they went crazy, kind of like 2 meters a year was not the exception, right? So maybe considering what you said with native species, maybe in combination with shrubs or others, we could actually use that excess water that has been removed from ground or where else that is polluted to do something good, and not simply, let it evaporate somewhere else and polluting the environment because it is not treated that way. But I don't know if you have experience with these kind of things, because it's a bit unusual. It's more practical and doesn't sound like a bit romantic restoration of ecosystems, right? It's rather problem solving.
Yeah, it's like a sort of a nature-based solution. Not really, but somehow it is, because first of all, I don't really have experience with this. This is the first time I hear it, but it sounds really interesting. Like, if we can manage to use trees or other vegetation to also clean our water, or use it in a way such that it's not wasted. So actually, I want to look into it more, and it's very interesting. So thank you.
Leah, I think you are not there. We have 5 minutes left. The Gree-link is processing. So if you still have burning question, Danra, go for it.
Yeah, just to add from our experience here also, in the dry area, we are using some kind of biodegradable bag. We fill it with some nutrient, compost, and many things, and we just leave it on the ground. And in the night, it can catch moisture, air moisture, and it's good for plants like grasses, not tree, but just grasses. And it's really working good.
Interesting.
I think
Thank you.
It can be also adapted. Yeah.
Okay, I think we still have some minutes left, and we don't have Leah. So I assume I would ask her a question and collect it and then send it to you later, or I can connect you two and then she can ask her question.
Of course.
And yeah, so comments or questions? Is there still any? Or some points need to be more clarified or more clarification? Okay, so what I learned, Leah, thank you very much, Frances, thank you very much for bringing light to better planting trees, because planting trees is a useful thing in general. And this is again like when you want to eat something, you need to find the proper combination of the food for your body. So when we want to plant trees, it's useful to pick up some locations where there were already trees or forests, but has been degraded for many years because of human overconsumption. And this is a useful thing rather than picking up already functioning ecosystems and plant trees on them and to show off, hey, we had planted we planted trees on, for instance, grasslands. This is not a good thing. It's like bringing back carbon where it does not belong to. So thank you very much, Frances, for a very interesting presentation. Guys, we will share with you the presentation and also the recording and the link to the recording so you can watch it later. I saw some colleagues came to the webinar later, at the latest minutes, so you missed very much of the webinar, so you can watch it later. It was a very interesting webinar. And Dandra, do you want to say something?
No.
Okay.
I was just
Okay, very good. So I have some email address from you. I would assume that, Dandra, if you can write us an email or give us your email. Daniel, I don't have your email address. Abdul Majid, I don't have your email address. Jong, not an email address. Nina, not an email address. Shahriar, I don't have an email address from you. Tofail, if you can write us an email, mail@bettersoil.info, and then we can send the presentation to you and the recording with it. So I can write it in the chat now, mail@bettersoil.info. Yes.
Again,
Yes, I wrote it in the chat. I wrote it in the chat, mail@bettersoil.info. Just leave us a message like thumbs up or something. It shouldn't be a complete email. Then we send you the presentation and the recording. And you can find Leah, Frances. I think Leah has been stuck in my head. You can find Frances via her email address on the screen now, and then also find her on LinkedIn. And yeah, you can follow her and her work and what she's doing and what she's up to. Okay, then have a nice afternoon and keep you posted on the next webinars.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frances. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.